I just wanted to use this video as an opportunity to talk about polygroups in Zbrush and the importance and the role that they've always played in Zbrush from the very start. They've always been an integral part of the workflow, and as Zbrush has evolved, the polygrouping feature set has evolved immensely alongside. And in the early days, from its first release, like Zbrush had polygrouping, but it was obviously just straight up organic sculpting package, revolutionary at the time. But polygroup was, would have been used. Say you're sculpting a head, you might isolate the eye region or something with a polygroup selection, and you could zoom right in and just work on the eye, concentrate on the eye region without the overheads of the rest of the geometry, or taking up space on your canvas and taking up your RAM. But obviously now, in the last couple of releases, the last few releases, we've had hard surface capabilities introduced, and with that has come more and more polygroup features, and it's gotten to the stage now, especially with R7, this new polygrouping within the Z modeler brush is absolute. It's ultimate control we have now over polygrouping. It's a really incredible feature they've added, and a lot of people now with R7 they're dying to jump in and test out the box model and see what it's all about. But for me, the polygroup feature here, with all these, it's incredible. It really is a brilliant feature they've added. We can do whatever the hell we like now with polygrouping. So I also wanted to show a practical example of using polygrouping for UVing, a low poly kind of a hard surface mesh like this. So as I've been talking there, I've just noticed now this has creasing all around it. So if we were to actually, before I do that, I've just noticed that a couple of these edges are missing creasing. So just come in here and hover over an edge and crease edge, and we're just going to make sure symmetry's on. Just going to crease these few edges here. So crease, and just crease these as well. And then I'm going to go to crease and poly loop, and just crease. Let's go to crease within the face selection. So crease, and we can actually just crease polygroup island. So I'll just crease these, and we won't worry about these on the inside. So let's say, for instance, we have our creasing in here, and this is just this model. It was just from the lengthy kind of series I did on box modeling there in R7, creating the Warhammer 40k plasma bolter. It was a learning exercise for myself, and I just thought I'd record it and create a tutorial out of for other people that were interested in learning some of the basic tools that didn't really have much experience poly modeling, sub D modeling. So with that said, I'm going to just go down and show this feature here that's also been added recently. And if we come down to polygroups, and you can see this groups by normals. So anyone who's you might be familiar with smoothing groups, as they're called in 3D Max, are based on the angle of the normal, and you set a threshold, it'll create smoothing groups. So it's the same idea here, except we're going to be creating polygroups. So this is the default angle threshold, 45 degrees, and you can just group by normals and see now, because this is a completely hard surface with no beveling or chamfering, and it's all 90 degrees. So with the 45 threshold there, you can see how it's separated these things up. So if I bring that all the way up to 90, you can see now that nothing falls within that threshold, and everything gets the same polygroup. And similarly, if I bring it down to I would say bring it down to 5, you can see now that with an angle of 5, they're all falling within that threshold, and it's obviously, apart from the flat surfaces, they have an angle of 0. So I'm going to set that back now to 45, and this is a set that back to 45, and this is a very simple model. As I say, it's only 90-degree corners and everything, so obviously you're not really going to be working on models like this a lot, because you're going to have chamfering and everything in the corners, particularly if it's a game mesh. You're baking normal maps, you want to have rounded off kind of corners. So I'll just undo that, and we'll come back up to this other new feature that's within crease menu, and that is bevel, where we can convert our crease data into geometry. So proportional width, you want to check that. That means that your edge loops will stay parallel with each other, so it's a proportional width. This is the width of the bevel, so I'll change that to 0.07. The default is 0.05, and then we'll bevel that, and you can see now it's created geometry from that creasing. So we have some unwanted creasing here, so I might want to get rid of some of that, and you just want to make sure that you don't have that on your models. You can see these creases are running around here, so to get rid of them, we can just crease while hovering over an edge, and just a single edge, or you can do edge loop, so just edge loop complete, and just alt to get rid of that, and just the same there. And now if we want to keep these, that was when I creased this poly loop here, this poly group, it creased all the way around down onto these flat ones, so you can see here what's how that's behaving. So we've no crease in here, because I didn't want that in the model when I was building it. So what we want to do there is just go back to crease, a single edge, and just you can just uncrease these. So holding down Alt to uncrease, uncrease, and uncrease. So this is another amazing thing that's been added with ZModeler, is the ability now to have ultimate control over creasing as well. Whereas before, you know, you had to do a lot of you had to create polygroups using you know, our control shift selection tools, and it was just a lot more time consuming. But this has added again ultimate control now over creasing, where we can crease individual edges, loops, all based on polygroups. So it's brilliant. This set modeler is it's an amazing it's an amazing tool that's been added for many reasons. So with that said, note that creasing sorted out there. Now I'm going to convert this again to geometry, convert the creasing to geometry. So let's say this would be more an example of, you know, what you might have. So a little bit of tweaking there. One thing to bear in mind is that when you bevel, create geometry from your creasing using this bevel, it's going to create triangles on the corners. So you might want to you know, come in here, and I'll just drop down the brush size, and we could just space this out by hovering over a vert, and then just go to move, or we can actually slide it and just keep it constrained to the edge, so we can move it up and then move it back a bit, just to tidy that up a small bit. Do the same here, slide back and slide up, and you can just go around and check your model for anything like that. So when you're happy then, and you have your creases converted to geometry, you can see now if I wanted to UV this based on polygroups, it's not going to work out too well. It's going to I'll just come up to UV master, and we can leave symmetry on polygroups. Obviously we want this turned on because we're relying on our polygroups. You can think of this similarly as cutting seams in your 3D package. So wherever a polygroups are separated, wherever faces are separated by polygroups, this is like creating a seam in your 3D package. So if we were to unwrap this and flatten, you can see it's crazy, because you have things like this, continuous loops that it doesn't know how to unwrap, because you're asking too much of the algorithm, and you know, all these other individual parts that are broken up based on the polygroups. So we'll just unflatten that, and we'll go back down. We'll go back to our polygroup feature here, polygroups, and into groups by normals, and we click again now on 45. You know, and that would be a pretty good starting point for this particular model. But I'm going to raise that up. We'll say to 60. Or sorry, I meant drop it down. We'll just drop it down to 15. And now, let's say for instance that's the result we got, the best result we could get by using this. We'd use that as a starting point, and then we go in and organize all our polygroups a bit better. So firstly, you know, this is this solid mesh here that, you know, we don't need all this internal geometry. Right, so let's say for instance we want to get rid of all these inner polys because we don't want them or need them. So what we could do is just come back here and say, you know, set that to 30, and just do this just to get rid of all the inner, make it easier to get rid of the ones we don't want before we unwrap. So we can just Control Shift click, and whatever you Control Shift click on, it's going to isolate that polygroup, and then you can just click on it again, and then that'll hide it, and then you can just delete hidden, and that's just a way of getting rid of that whole section of internal geometry that we don't want. And then you can do the same here, Control Shift click again, and delete hidden. And now you can see these groups of polys here, they're all internal, but some of them are connected to ones at the front. So what we might want to do there is just, you know, hide all these. Sorry, before we do that, I'm just gonna delete hidden, because I don't think I deleted that. So just make sure to delete hidden, so that when you're hiding other stuff and whatever, it doesn't come back. So we just hide these, just so that we can get a better view. I'll just undo that one there. So now what we want to do is we want to break these off, because these are all on the inside, and we'd like to get rid of them. So what we can do there is Control Shift drag and just hold Alt, and now they're gone. But obviously we don't want to delete hidden now, because all our other geometry is still there, you know. So if we bring that back and we Control Shift drag without holding Alt, it's going to isolate that, and then we can Control Shift swipe on the canvas, and that's going to invert that, and now we can delete hidden. So getting used to this Control Shift Alt space to move it around, getting used to this workflow and methodology and making it muscle memory is really important in ZBrush, and it took me a while to get used to it. It used to drive me crazy, and I've been using ZBrush a good while, long before the HardSurface stuff was ever in it. But you know, I could never get the hang of it, but I just practice, and you know, once you do get used to it, you know, it just becomes second nature, to say muscle memory. So I'd still like to get rid of these ones here. You know, I still would like to get rid of these ones. So we can do the same thing. We can just hide these bits and bobs here, and then we can just Control Shift drag, and don't press Alt, and that'll isolate them. And then we can just Control Shift drag again, and that'll invert it. And now we can just Control Shift click and add that into our hidden selection, and now delete hidden. And that's pretty much using you know, some of the tools there, and particularly this. That's gotten rid of all the internal geometry, and now we've deleted hidden. So now let's say we've done that and we've sorted that out, and now what we want to do is break all these up into logical what that is there. Break all these up into logical. I think there was some crease in there that created this geometry here that shouldn't have been there when I converted the bevel and converted the creasing over to bevel geometry. But not to worry about that. I won't bother trying to fix that up now, wasting people's time. It's no big deal. So this is just basically to give you an idea of how all this sort of stuff works and how important it is. So as I was saying, we want to break this up now into logical pieces, or seams if you will, for unwrapping. So just as a test here, if I come back to UV Master, Symmetry and Polygroups on, and just unwrap again and flatten, you know, it's a pretty good result. There's no big long kind of thin poly loops connected together, but I'll just unflatten that. And let's say we wanted to be a bit more precise, we can easily do that now with some of the existing tools and our Z modeler specific tools. So I'm going to just go in here, hover over face and polygroup and polyloop, and then we can just, if you see this this little indicator, it's a little orange line, and depending on which edge your cursor favors, it's going to point to that edge, and that's going to determine the direction of the action. In this case, we're going to be creating a new polygroup around this poly loop. So if I hold it out here, it's going to create one in that direction, and obviously then if I do that, it's going to create in that direction. So now we can just set these up, and then also if I click and hold the mouse down and press Shift, or sorry, Alt, we can change the polygroup, and that will be the new polygroup color that it's going to apply. So we could do the same, click and hold and tap Alt, and we can change that polygroup then, and just keep cycling through, and that's going to be the new polygroup. So we've all them now polygrouped, and we don't want this to be the same. You know, you could leave it like that, and Zbrush will unwrap it as we've shown. You know, has a very good relaxing algorithm, Zbrush, but just for the demonstration purposes here, and we show some more features here. So polygroup, flat island, and then we can just break that off, break this off. You know, so they're going to be individual UV shells, and then we have this one here. This entire one is its own polygroup, which is perfect. But let's say, for instance, it wasn't. So I'll just add some different polygroups in here. So let's say it was like that, and it was all different groups, and we wanted it all to be one group. Well, we can just do the same thing, Control Shift click, Control Shift click again, and then just add in those other bits Sorry, they were the same. They were the same group. That was the same group. So I'm just going to redo that again, and we'll just change those groups. So I'm just going to polygroup flat island, click and hold, and then just tap Alt. So let's say, and we see there the way I created a crease by mistake when I was over the edge. Well, if you're doing a particular task and it involves sort of precise clicking, one thing you might want to do is say we want to disable the edge actions. We can just come up to do nothing, and that'll just change it so it won't do anything then. It'll just ignore that. So that's another important thing to bear in mind. So okay, back to what I was saying. Yeah, so these are different polygroups. We wanted all to one. So I just Control Shift click, click again, and then click again, and now drag to invert that, and now Control W, and that's all one group now. Control Shift click brings it all back. And another thing I just wanted to talk about was, let's say we want these bevels to be part of this orangey kind of polygroup here. Well, what we could do there is Control Shift click, Control Shift click, and Control Shift X is going to grow that selection. So that's going to grow. So it obviously grows out this side as well. And there's no geometry in there, so it's not going to grow out that way. So we don't want these ones. So all we have to do is Control Shift drag Alt hide, Control Shift drag Alt hide, and then Control W, new polygroup, Control Shift click, bring everything back. So now we have all that as a single polygroup there, around to there, you know. And we could probably, if we wanted to, and there's another tool here, mightn't work in this case, but it is called, if you go down to I think it's in polygroups, oh yeah, here it is here, merge similar groups, or merge stray groups. And you can see there that if I just undo that, you know, we have a stray group here, and it intelligently merges that group, so it's merged it in here. So that's another handy tool that's been added quite recently. Sorry, one other important thing that I wanted to mention was, and this has been in now for a couple of releases as well, but it's not really changed much, but it's because ZModeler has been introduced to Zbrush, it automatically sort of goes into a ZModeler mode. So let's say, for instance, we're just on whatever, any other brush bar the ZModeler brush, and if you hover over an edge, hold down Control and Shift, so if we hover over an edge, this is going to be an edge ring, so it's going to hide that edge ring. And if I was to hover over this one, Control Shift, this is going to give us a ring that way, so it's going to go perpendicular to whichever edge you Control Shift click on. So this has been in ZBrush for a while with polygroup selections, but now with the ZModeler brush in R7, when you do that, it almost automatically goes into the ZModeler mode. You can see here with the little orange lines, and it's you know, it's edge poly. So just an important thing to mention, that's edge rings and edge loops, and how to hide them individually. Alright, so now with all that done, we'll come down, or we come up again to UV Master, and Symmetry and Polygroups, Unwrap and Flatten. And you can see now we've less islands here, and there's a few kind of stray errant strips here and there. So, you know, depending on your own personal needs, you might want to you know, add some of these in, or whatever. You can see how it's been done anyway. There's many tools there now to do it. So and it's particularly good, like, for, you know, hard surface kind of stuff, which a lot of people hate UVing. So another thing to bear in mind, once we're in here in what we call for argument's sake, the UV view, you can still use your transpose tools here. So if I control click on this, it's going to mask everything else out, and then I can just use my tools as normal. Sorry, just turn off symmetry, and we can just move things around and scale them, but I wouldn't advise scaling them in the UV. You scale them because it'll stretch your UVs. Then we could, you can rotate them holding shift to constrain, snap constrain to an axis. So don't forget, you can control drag, this is all available to you for arranging your UV islands or shells. And with that said, it's pretty much, I think, all I wanted to talk about. So mainly the idea of the video, as I say, was just to impress on people how vitally important it is to understand polygroups, how they work, how to manipulate them, and all the tools involved in making them work to your advantage, And most importantly, to start with, if you're not used to it, is this Control Shift, select lasso, and Alt to invert it. Just getting used to that alone, it's worth even spending time just sitting there and just practicing until it's second nature, well worth it. Okay, so I think we'll leave it at that, and I hope this video's been helpful to people. I just thought it was worth putting a video out there, as I say, about this, because it is so important, and particularly with R7, it's an amazing addition to said modeler brush. It really is. So enough of the fanboy shy talk. I'll let you go there. Alright, cheers, thanks, good luck.